The morning light spills through the curtains. Margaret opens her eyes slowly, feeling the weight of another day. Her back feels tight, like it hasn't moved in years. She sits on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her knees. A quiet sigh escapes her lips. At 68, she often wonders when her body stopped listening. Outside, the world hums with energy. Inside, she feels stuck, as if her spine has forgotten how to bend. She remembers when mornings used to feel light, when tying her shoes didn't feel like a small mountain to climb. Today, something shifts in her mind. She looks toward the window and sees the soft sway of trees. They bend gently with the wind, never breaking. And she thinks maybe she can learn from them. Maybe movement isn't about strength but softness. She stands slowly, feeling the pull in her back. It's uncomfortable but also alive. For the first time in a long time, she decides not to sit back down. Today she will move. Not to chase youth, but to rediscover what it means to feel free again. Margaret used to think movement belonged to the young. She would watch her grandchildren run across the yard and smile. But deep down, she missed the feeling of her own body in motion. The way her arms once swung freely. The way her spine once curved with grace. Now every turn felt careful, every step a reminder of stiffness. She often told herself, "It's just age." That phrase became her quiet excuse, whispered each morning. But one small moment changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm and gentle. Her granddaughter dropped a bright red ball on the floor. Margaret bent to pick it up, but the movement stopped halfway. A sharp tightness ran across her lower back. She froze, embarrassed, even though no one noticed. Her granddaughter laughed and ran off again. But Margaret stayed still, hand hovering above the floor. That small act, bending, had become something she could no longer do easily. It was a simple truth, but it echoed through her mind all night. The next morning, she sat with her cup of tea, watching sunlight dance on the table. She whispered, "I need to move again." Not like before, but differently. Gently, intentionally. She began searching for ways to help her body remember. Stretching seemed like a good place to start. But it wasn't about becoming flexible like a dancer. It was about finding comfort inside her own skin again. She wanted to stand tall without the pull of pain. She wanted to feel her spine move like a flowing river, not a locked door. So she began her journey, one slow morning at a time. Her first goal was simple, to move without fear. She placed a yoga mat by her living room window. The same window where she used to water her plants each morning. She decided it would become her new space of hope. She stood barefoot, feeling the soft mat beneath her feet. The world outside felt quiet, as if waiting for her to begin. Her back protested at first, but her breath stayed calm. She realized she had been holding her breath for years, not just physically. It was a kind of quiet tension that lived inside her. As she moved her arms slowly, she felt something open within. A small stretch, a quiet ache, and then relief. Her body was speaking again, and she was finally listening. Each morning after that, she showed up on the mat. Some days it was just 5 minutes. Other days, she stayed until her tea grew cold. Her movements were never perfect, but they were hers. And with every gentle twist, every slow bend, she reclaimed a piece of herself. Friends began to notice the light returning to her eyes. She laughed more, stood taller, moved easier. But more than that, she felt connected again, to her body, her breath, her life. Margaret realized that rediscovering movement wasn't about youth. It was about respect for the body that carried her through every season. And as she stretched one quiet morning, sunlight on her face, she smiled. Because for the first time in years, her body didn't feel old. It simply felt alive. Margaret began to wonder about her spine. She had never really thought about it before. It was just there doing its job quietly. But now, every stretch reminded her of how central it truly was. The spine, she learned, is like the body's main bridge. It connects the head to the hips, the breath to every movement. It bends, twists, supports and balances everything she does. Without it, nothing flows. She started reading small articles about it, watching simple videos online. She learned that over time, the spine can lose its natural curve. Muscles tight, joints stiffen, and posture slowly changes. Years of sitting, lifting, and worrying add up quietly. One day you just wake up and realize something doesn't move the same. Margaret thought about all the mornings she sat hunched over her coffee, all the times she forgot to stretch after long walks or long talks. Her body had been whispering to her for years, but she was too busy, too distracted to listen. Now she was ready to pay attention. When she moved through her first gentle stretches, she imagined her spine as a tree, strong at the base, flexible through the trunk, and light at the top. She imagined each breath as wind moving through its branches. With every inhale, she pictured space between each vertebra. With every exhale, she released tension like falling leaves. It felt peaceful. She realized that stretching wasn't only physical. It was emotional too. The spine carried not just posture but stories, years of habits, thoughts, and memories. Every stiffness was a sentence her body had been writing in silence. And now she was learning to rewrite those lines. Slowly, patiently, one breath at a time. Margaret also learned that flexibility didn't mean bending far. It meant moving with awareness. It meant noticing small changes, a lighter turn, a deeper breath, a softer step. Her instructor, a kind woman named June, told her something that stayed with her. "The spine doesn't just support you," June said. "It reflects how you live. If it's rigid, life feels tight. If it's open, life flows more easily." Those words echoed in Margaret's mind for days. She began to see movement as a form of gratitude. Each stretch was a quiet thank you to her body. Each twist was a reminder of strength that hadn't disappeared, only slept. Sometimes she would place her hand on her lower back and whisper, "Thank you for carrying me." It became a small ritual, her way of honoring her own resilience. On some mornings, she still felt the old tightness, but she no longer met it with frustration. Instead, she breathed through it, trusting that motion brings renewal. Her spine began to feel like a friend again, not a burden. It creaked less, moved more, and responded with kindness when she treated it gently. In that awareness, Margaret found something profound. A truth she wished she'd known sooner: flexibility isn't lost with age. It's rediscovered through care, breath, and patience. And as she stretched beside her window, the morning sun tracing her shoulders, she smiled. Because her spine was no longer silent. It was singing softly, the song of movement returning home. The first morning of her new routine was quiet. Margaret stood by the window, the world still half asleep. The soft light painted the walls a pale gold. She could hear the faint hum of birds outside, slow and steady. Her yoga mat waited, neatly rolled beside her chair. She unrolled it carefully, like opening a promise. The floor felt cool under her bare feet. Her breath came shallow at first, uncertain, like testing new air. She began with her warm-up, gentle and kind. Her instructor had told her, "Don't rush the beginning. Let the body wake up like morning light." So she listened. She closed her eyes and started with her neck. A slow circle, a soft stretch to each side. It creaked, yes, but it moved. She smiled. Then came the shoulders, rolling backward, rolling forward. Each motion loosened a piece of the tension she had carried for years. Her arms felt heavy at first, then lighter like they remembered. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with patience. Her spine began to follow. She bent forward slightly, just enough to feel the pull. It wasn't about how far she could go, but how gently she could arrive. Her knees stayed soft, her hands resting on her thighs. The stretch was small, but it felt like victory. Her breath slowed down, matching the rhythm of the morning. Then she moved to her sides, one arm over her head, reaching, stretching the ribs. She felt space open between her bones, like sunlight finding cracks in clouds. It wasn't dramatic, but it was beautiful. Every inch of her body seemed to whisper, "I remember this." Margaret realized stretching wasn't about forcing change. It was about inviting movement back into stillness. She began to add gentle breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Each inhale expanded her chest, each exhale softened her shoulders. Her mind started to quiet. The worries of age, the doubts, the comparisons, they drifted away. She was simply there, present in her body. She moved slowly from one stretch to another. Her back bent, her spine curved, her breath guided her. The movements were small, but each one carried meaning. She thought about how she had once ignored this feeling. The quiet dialogue between body and breath. Now she cherished it. Every stretch became a sentence of self-care. Every breath, a note of gratitude. After 15 minutes, she stopped and stood tall. Her body felt warm, alive, awake. The stiffness wasn't gone, but it had softened. And that was enough. She walked to the window, watching the trees sway outside. They moved with the wind, not against it. She realized that's what stretching truly was, moving with life, not resisting it. Her body was learning that again, one breath at a time. Margaret smiled softly. Her day had just begun, but something deep inside already felt new. She whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone but to her own body. It had waited so long for this simple act of kindness. Margaret soon found her rhythm. Her stretches began to flow together like gentle waves. Each movement felt connected, one leading softly into the next. She no longer counted seconds or followed a timer. She followed her breath instead. It guided her, steady and calm like a trusted friend. Her routine began with the cat-cow stretch. She knelt on the mat, hands under shoulders, knees under hips. As she inhaled, her back arched slightly, her heart lifting. As she exhaled, her spine rounded, her head dropped low. The motion felt slow and soothing, like the spine was breathing too. Each repetition washed away a little stiffness. Her back began to feel like it was learning to dance again. She smiled quietly, lost in the rhythm of her breath. Next came the seated side bends. She sat cross-legged, one hand resting beside her, the other reaching overhead. A deep stretch spread across her ribs. She felt air travel where it hadn't reached in years. It was as if her lungs were rediscovering their full shape. She switched sides, the same movement, the same gentle care. The simplicity of it all felt beautiful. Then she stood up slowly, grounding her feet on the mat. She folded forward, letting her arms hang heavy. Her knees stayed soft, her back curved naturally. The first time she tried this, she couldn't reach her shins. Now her fingertips brushed the mat. She didn't push. She let gravity help her. The tension melted bit by bit, like snow under sunlight. Her breath deepened, her spine lengthened. She felt lighter than she had in months. Then came her hip circles, slow, deliberate, patient. Her hips moved in wide loops, her back following the motion. It felt playful, almost childlike. She remembered dancing in her kitchen years ago, laughing with her husband. This small movement brought that memory back, warm and sweet. She finished with a gentle chest opener. Her hands clasped behind her back, her shoulders rolled down. Her chest lifted toward the ceiling, her eyes softened. The stretch filled her with quiet pride. For years she had walked slightly hunched, hiding from pain. Now she stood open, unguarded, tall. The final part was the seated spinal twist. She crossed one leg over the other and turned gently to one side. Her hand rested behind her for support. She looked over her shoulder, exhaling slowly. Each twist felt like unlocking an old door. Her spine responded with gratitude, not resistance. She switched sides, moving slowly, mindfully. The world outside her window seemed to mirror her stillness. Birds flew past in unhurried lines, the sky calm and endless. Margaret stayed seated for a while, her breath steady. The room felt filled with peace, like she had invited calm inside her bones. It wasn't exercise anymore. It was conversation between body, breath, and time. When she finally rose, her body felt balanced, light, whole. And as she rolled up her mat, she whispered to herself, "This is what healing feels like." Weeks passed, and Margaret's mornings became a quiet ritual. Each stretch felt like turning a new page in her life. She no longer rushed through movements or sought perfection. She learned to listen, not just to her instructor but to her body. It spoke softly, through warmth, tension, and breath. Some days it said, "Go slow." Other days, "You can reach further." She began to understand that awareness was the true practice. It wasn't about how far she bent, but how deeply she listened. One morning, she noticed something small but powerful. When she woke up, her back no longer ached the same way. The stiffness that once greeted her had softened. Her steps to the kitchen felt lighter, her balance steadier. She realized change had been growing quietly, without fanfare. It wasn't a miracle moment, but a steady unfolding. Her body was healing through kindness, not force. Still, there were mornings when fatigue returned. Old tension would rise, stubborn and familiar. In the past, she would have given up, sighed, and sat down. But now, she met those moments differently. She took a slow breath, acknowledged the feeling, and moved gently. She learned that rest was part of the rhythm, not a failure. Each pause was a reminder that healing is not a straight line. Her instructor once said, "Even stillness is movement if it's done with awareness." Margaret carried those words like a seed in her heart. When her knees felt sore, she rested. When her energy bloomed, she moved with joy. She had stopped judging her body and started befriending it. Every morning became an act of trust, trust that her body knew the way. She began noticing beauty in small details. The sound of her breath syncing with birdsong. The warmth of sunlight on her shoulders as she twisted gently. The way her spine curved gracefully, without effort. Her body was no longer something to fix. It was something to honor. Each stretch became a thank you for years of carrying her forward. She felt gratitude rise like warmth in her chest. She had learned patience, the kind that doesn't ask for results. Just presence. One afternoon, while sitting with her friend June, she smiled and said, "It's strange. My body feels stronger now, even though I move slower." June nodded, her eyes kind. "That's what awareness does," she said. "It gives strength without struggle." Margaret thought about that as she walked home. Her pace was easy, her shoulders open. She could feel her spine aligning naturally with each step. For the first time in years, her movements felt effortless. Not because she was trying, but because she had stopped fighting herself. That night she lay in bed, her body calm and steady. She thought of all the mornings she'd spent listening, breathing, learning. And she smiled into the dark. Her body had found its rhythm again, gentle, patient, alive. Stretching soon became more than a morning habit for Margaret. It turned into a quiet philosophy, a way of living. Every movement she made throughout the day carried new awareness. When she reached for a cup, she noticed her shoulder relaxing. When she stood up from her chair, she did it with care and grace. The lessons from her mat followed her everywhere. Her spine no longer felt like a burden she had to manage. It felt like a companion, guiding her with gentle strength. Her friends began to see the change before she even spoke of it. They noticed how she stood taller, how her steps seemed lighter. One friend asked, "Margaret, what's your secret?" She laughed softly and said, "I just started listening to my body." Her words carried the kind of wisdom that only comes with patience. Soon, a few of her friends joined her for morning stretches. They gathered in her garden, mats spread across the soft grass. The sun rose slowly, painting gold across their faces. They moved together, breathing in sync, sharing quiet smiles. Laughter sometimes broke through the calm, and Margaret didn't mind. This was healing too: connection, laughter, breath. She guided them through gentle twists, slow bends, and easy folds. Her voice was calm, her movements steady, graceful. She never tried to be a teacher, yet somehow she became one. Not through instruction, but through example. She showed that movement was not about control, but kindness. Not about age, but awareness. One morning her granddaughter joined them, curious and bright-eyed. The little girl tried to copy her grandmother's stretches, giggling. Margaret smiled, helping her find balance. Their hands met in a shared pose, the child's soft fingers wrapping around hers. In that moment, generations connected through movement and love. The garden was filled with sunlight and laughter. Margaret felt a wave of gratitude rise in her chest. She thought of all the mornings she had spent alone, unsure, stiff. Now she moved surrounded by warmth, breath, and joy. Her body felt free, her heart wide open. She realized flexibility wasn't just about her spine. It was about her spirit, her ability to bend without breaking. Life had its storms, but she could now sway through them like a tree. Strong roots, soft branches, steady in the wind. Even on difficult days, she remembered to stretch and breathe. Her practice had become her anchor, her reminder of resilience. Every twist, every inhale, carried a quiet message of hope. She no longer feared growing older. She embraced it like a story unfolding, each chapter gentler than the last. When people asked her age, she smiled and said, "Old enough to move with grace." As the sun set one evening, she sat quietly by her window. Her spine felt long, her breath deep, her mind at peace. She had learned that movement, when done with love, keeps the soul alive. And as the sky turned to gold, she whispered to herself, "I am still growing." Because even at 68, her body and her spirit had found new freedom. The morning light returns, soft and golden. Margaret stands by her window, the same place where it all began. Her body moves with quiet confidence, no rush, no strain. Each breath feels full, each stretch familiar and kind. Her spine lengthens, her shoulders open, her heart calm. She smiles, remembering the days when movement felt impossible. Now it feels like breathing, natural, necessary, alive. She understands now that flexibility isn't about touching her toes. It's about touching life with gentleness every single day. Her practice has become her meditation, her gratitude in motion. She has learned to bend without breaking, to soften without giving up. The years have shaped her, but they haven't confined her. Instead, they've taught her how to listen, how to move with care. She whispers a quiet thank you to her body, her breath, her patience. The room feels still, but inside her, everything is alive. The wind outside moves through the trees, and she mirrors its rhythm. Strong, graceful, free. And as she rolls up her mat, she smiles again. Because she knows this is not an ending, but a beautiful continuation.